I walked into my own kitchen to find a stranger sitting at my table, eating soup from my late wife's favorite bowl, while another man I'd never seen before lounged in my recliner, watching hockey on my TV. The woman looked up, smiled at me like we were old friends, and said, "George, don't you remember? I told you my brother would be staying with us for a while. Go lie down. You're confused again." I wasn't confused. My mind was perfectly clear, and I knew right then that I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But before I tell you what happened next, I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I'm sharing this because the loneliest moments in our lives can make us the most vulnerable, and I want you to learn from my mistakes. My name is George Patterson. I'm 63 years old, and up until 18 months ago, I was the principal of Riverside Secondary School in Kingston, Ontario. I retired after 38 years in education because my wife Helen was sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She fought for 14. When she finally passed last March, I thought the hard part was over. I had no idea the real battle was just beginning. Helen and I had been together since we were 19, high school sweethearts who actually made it work. We had our son Michael when we were 23. Raised him in the same 3-bedroom house we'd bought in '87. It wasn't fancy, just a solid brick home in a quiet neighborhood near Lake Ontario. We'd paid off the mortgage years ago, saved diligently, and had a decent nest egg from my pension and our investments. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable. More than enough for one person living alone. That was the problem. After Helen died, the house felt cavernous. Every room echoed with memories. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. Her gardening gloves hung by the back door. I'd find myself setting 2 plates for dinner out of habit, then standing in the kitchen staring at the extra plate, remembering she was gone. Michael lived in Vancouver with his wife and twin daughters. We talked every Sunday, but he had his own life, his own family. I understood that. I didn't want to be a burden. The loneliness crept up on me like fog off the lake. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and lie there in the dark, listening to the house settle, feeling the empty space beside me where Helen should have been. My friends from work meant well, but they had their own lives, their own routines. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped coming and the sympathy cards tapered off, people moved on. I was left with silence and too many hours to fill. That's when I made the first mistake. I responded to an ad from a local home care agency. Companionship services for seniors, it read. Someone to help with daily tasks. Provide social interaction. Assist with errands. I told myself it was practical. I wasn't getting any younger. My knees bothered me on the stairs. Sometimes I'd forget to eat proper meals. A little help around the house made sense, didn't it? But if I'm honest, I was just desperate for someone to talk to. Someone to break up the suffocating quiet. Rachel Morrison arrived on a Tuesday in September, almost exactly 6 months after Helen's funeral. She was 28 years old, petite, with short blonde hair and a warm smile that reminded me of one of my former students, the kind who always volunteered to help clean the classroom after school. She wore professional-looking clothes, navy pants, and a cardigan, and carried a leather portfolio with references and certifications from the agency. "Mr. Patterson," she said, extending her hand with just the right amount of firmness. "It's so nice to meet you. I read your intake form, and I'm so sorry for your loss. My grandmother passed from cancer 2 years ago, so I understand how difficult this time must be." I invited her in, offered her tea. We sat in the living room, the autumn sun streaming through the windows Helen used to keep so clean, and Rachel asked me about myself, not in a perfunctory way, but like she genuinely cared. She wanted to know about my career, about Helen, about the photos on the mantle. She laughed at my stories about unruly students and budget meetings. For the first time in months, I felt like a person again, instead of just a widower going through the motions. "I think we'd work well together," she said as she stood to leave. "I can come 3 times a week to start. Light housekeeping, meal preparation, companionship, whatever you need. And please, call me Rachel. Mr. Patterson makes me think you're going to give me detention." I laughed. I actually laughed. I hired her on the spot. For the first month, Everything seemed perfect. Rachel would arrive on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. She'd tidy up, prepare meals for me to heat up later, sit and chat while we had coffee. She was easy to talk to, never pushy, always considerate. She'd remind me to take my blood pressure medication, suggest we go for walks when the weather was nice, help me organize Helen's things when I was finally ready to donate some of her clothes. "You're doing so well, George," she'd say, and I believed her. I started looking forward to her visits, counting the days between them. Michael called one Sunday and commented that I sounded better, more like myself. I told him about Rachel, how helpful she'd been. "That's great, Dad," he said. "I'm glad you've got some support there. Just be careful, okay? Make sure the agency is legitimate." "Of course it is," I said, slightly annoyed. "I'm not senile, Michael." I should have listened to the concern in his voice. I should have paid more attention to the small things that didn't quite add up. But I was so grateful for the company, so relieved to not feel alone, that I ignored the warning signs. It started subtly. Rachel began arriving earlier and staying later. She'd show up at 7 in the morning instead of 9, saying she wanted to make me a proper breakfast. She'd linger until 6 or 7 in the evening, insisting on preparing dinner and cleaning up afterward. At first, I protested. I didn't want to take up so much of her time. But she'd wave off my concerns. "I don't mind, George. Honestly, you're my favorite client. Most of the people I work with just want me to clean and leave. You actually appreciate the company. Besides, what else am I doing? I live alone too, and my apartment is depressing." So I let her stay. She started bringing her laptop, working on other things at my dining room table between tasks. She'd receive phone calls and step outside to take them, speaking in low, tense tones I couldn't quite hear. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd smile and say, "Just dealing with my ex. He's being difficult about money. Nothing for you to worry about." Then she started talking about her financial troubles. Her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. Her student loans were crushing her. Her landlord was raising her rent, and she didn't know how she'd manage. She never asked me for money directly, but the hints were there, hanging in the air like smoke. I found myself offering to pay her directly instead of going through the agency, giving her a bonus for all the extra hours. "Are you sure?" she'd ask, eyes wide. "George, that's so generous." "I can't accept." "Please," I'd say. "You do so much for me. Let me help." Looking back, I can see how she played me, how she identified exactly what I needed. Loneliness, purpose, someone to care for, and gave it to me in measured doses. She made herself indispensable slowly, so gradually that I didn't notice the net tightening around me. 2 months after she started, Rachel asked if she could store some boxes in my garage. Her apartment building was doing renovations, and she needed temporary space. Of course, I agreed. The garage was empty, except for Helen's car, which I couldn't bring myself to sell. A week later, she asked if she could use my address for some mail because her postal service was unreliable. Again, I said yes. Why wouldn't I help someone who'd helped me so much? By November, she was spending more time at my house than at her own apartment. She had a toothbrush in the bathroom, changes of clothes in the guest room, her groceries in my fridge. When I mentioned that maybe she should cut back her hours, she looked hurt. "Do you not want me here anymore? Have I done something wrong?" No, I rushed to reassure her. "I just don't want to take advantage of your time." "You're not. George, you're like family to me. My own father passed when I was young. Being here, helping you, it means something to me. But if you want me to leave..." "I don't want you to leave," I said, and I meant it. The thought of going back to that empty, silent house terrified me. Michael called in early December. "Dad, I tried calling the agency to verify Rachel's credentials. The number you gave me is disconnected." "That can't be right," I said. "Let me check." I went through my papers, found the agency information. Michael was right. The number rang to a disconnected line. The website was gone. "Dad, I think something's wrong. Can you send me Rachel's information? I want to run a background check." "Michael, you're being paranoid. Rachel's been nothing but helpful." "Dad, please, just let me check. for my peace of mind. I was annoyed, but I sent him what information I had. Rachel's full name, the address she'd given me for her apartment, her supposed credentials. 3 days later, Michael called back. His voice was tight. "Dad, that address doesn't exist. The credentials are fake. The agency she claimed to work for went out of business 4 years ago. And Dad, there's no Rachel Morrison matching her description registered as a PSW in Ontario. Who is this woman?" I felt cold. There must be a mistake. I'll talk to her. There's an explanation. But when I confronted Rachel, she didn't deny it. She cried instead, big tears rolling down her cheeks as she sat at my kitchen table. "I'm so sorry, George. I should have told you the truth. The agency went under, and I couldn't afford to lose the income. I have all the training. I swear I do. I just couldn't afford the official registration fees. I needed the work. Please don't fire me. Please. You're all I have." I wanted to be angry. I should have been angry. But instead, I felt sorry for her. She seemed so vulnerable, so desperate. And the truth was, she had been helping me. What did it matter if she had official papers? "You should have been honest," I said. "I know. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." I told Michael there'd been a misunderstanding, that everything was fine. I could hear the frustration in his voice, but what could he do from 3,000 miles away? I was an adult. I could make my own decisions. That was my second mistake. By Christmas, I knew something was seriously wrong. I started noticing money missing from my wallet. Not huge amounts, $20 or $30 at a time, but consistent. When I mentioned it to Rachel, she suggested I was misremembering what I'd taken out. "It happens, George. My grandmother used to do the same thing. Maybe we should set up a system for you to track your cash better." Then I noticed charges on my credit card I didn't recognize. When I called the bank, they told me the charges were made online, from my computer, but I barely used the computer anymore except to check email. Rachel used it frequently, though, sitting at the desk in my den while I watched television. "Rachel," I said one evening, "did you use my credit card?" She looked shocked. "Of course not. George, I would never. Why would you think that? There are charges I don't remember making. You probably just forgot. Or maybe someone got your number somehow. We should cancel the card and get you a new one. I'll call the bank for you tomorrow." She was so helpful, so concerned, that I almost believed her. Almost. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and started adding things up. The missing cash, the credit card charges, the way she'd isolated me, slowly but surely, from my normal routines. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen my neighbor Tom, who used to come by for coffee every Saturday. When had I stopped going to the community center for my book club? I got up and went to my den. My computer was password protected, but when I tried to log in, my password didn't work. I tried several variations. Nothing. Had Rachel changed it? I looked through my desk drawers, searching for my banking information. Some documents were missing, including the folder where I kept statements from my investment account. My heart was pounding now. I went to the kitchen, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake Rachel, who was sleeping in the guest room, as she'd been doing more and more often lately. I found my phone and called my bank's 24-hour line. After navigating the automated system, I finally reached a representative. "I need to check on some recent transactions," I said. The representative pulled up my account. As she read off the recent activity, my stomach dropped. Transfers I didn't authorize, withdrawals I hadn't made, thousands of dollars, moved from my savings to my checking, then taken out in cash, or transferred to accounts I didn't recognize. "Sir, are you aware of these transactions?" the representative asked. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I think someone's been stealing from me. I'm going to flag your account immediately, and—" The kitchen light flicked on. Rachel stood in the doorway, wearing one of Helen's old robes. How had I not noticed she'd taken that? Her expression was unreadable. "George? What are you doing up? Who are you talking to?" I hung up the phone. "Rachel, I need you to leave. Now." Her face changed. The warm, caring mask dropped away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, too. This is my house." "Is it?" She moved closer, and I instinctively stepped back. Because I've been living here for 4 months, George. I receive mail here. My driver's license has this address. I have tenant rights. You can't just kick me out. You've been stealing from me. Have I? Or are you just confused? You know, I've been documenting your behavior. The memory lapses. The times you couldn't remember what day it was. The medication you forgot to take. I have notes, George. Dates, times, incidents. If you try to accuse me of anything, I'll show everyone that you're not capable of managing your own affairs. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting beneath me. Why are you doing this? Because people like you make it easy, she said, and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there, shaking, until sunrise. Then I called Michael. He was on a plane that afternoon. While he traveled, I stayed in my bedroom with the door locked, listening to Rachel move around the house like she owned it. At one point, someone rang the doorbell, a man's voice, unfamiliar. I heard Rachel let him in, heard them talking, heard him laugh. That's when I understood she wasn't alone in this. She had help. Michael arrived late that night. Rachel tried to block him at the door. I'm sorry, but George is resting. He's not well. Maybe you should come back tomorrow. I'm his son, Michael said, pushing past her. And you need to get out of my father's house. He found me in my bedroom. I'd never seen him look so angry, not even when he was a teenager. But his hands were gentle when he helped me up, his voice soft. Dad, we're fixing this, I promise. Over the next 48 hours, Michael worked with a speed and efficiency that reminded me of Helen. He called a lawyer, Tom Harper, who specialized in elder abuse cases. He called the police. He called a private investigator named Sarah Chen, and he sat with me, patient and kind, as I told them everything. Sarah Chen was a former Toronto police detective, now working private cases. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, and she didn't waste time. Mr. Patterson, I need access to all your financial documents, computer, phone records, everything. Can you do that? I nodded. Michael had already helped me change all my passwords, lock down my accounts. The bank had frozen everything pending investigation. Sarah interviewed me for hours. She took notes, asked pointed questions, never made me feel stupid or foolish, though I felt both. Then she started digging into Rachel's background. What she found made me physically ill. Rachel Morrison wasn't even her real name. She was Rachel Marie Kowalski, and she'd done this before. 3 times that Sarah could confirm, targeting widowed men in their 60s and 70s across southern Ontario. In London, she'd convinced a retired engineer to add her to his bank accounts before his daughter discovered the scheme and threatened legal action. In Hamilton, she'd stolen over $40,000 from a widower before his son physically removed her from the house. In Mississauga, she'd worked as a supposed caregiver for an elderly man named Arthur Brennan. Arthur's grandson had gotten suspicious and hired an investigator, but before they could act, Arthur died of a heart attack. Rachel disappeared the next day. The family believed the stress of her manipulation had killed him. There were no criminal charges in any of these cases, Sarah explained. The London victim was too embarrassed. The Hamilton victim's son just wanted her gone, and Arthur Brennan's family couldn't prove she'd done anything illegal, technically. She's careful. She isolates her victims, creates documentation to make them look incompetent, and drains them slowly enough that it's hard to prove theft. Until now, Michael said, his jaw tight. The police took my statement. Detective Morrison, no relation to Rachel's fake name, was sympathetic but realistic. The challenge is going to be proving she didn't have permission, he said. She's living in your house. She has documentation suggesting you gave her access to your accounts, and she'll claim everything was consensual. Her lawyer will argue that you're a grieving widower who made poor financial decisions. But the prior victims, I said, doesn't that establish a pattern? It does, and it helps. But we need more. We need hard evidence that she stole from you, not just evidence that you made questionable choices. That's when the man showed up. Rachel's brother, except Sarah discovered he wasn't her brother at all. His name was Derek Walsh, and he had a criminal record for fraud and identity theft. He'd been staying in my house for 3 days, and I had no idea what they'd been doing. Tom Harper, my lawyer, filed for an emergency restraining order and initiated eviction proceedings. But Rachel fought back. Her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, argued that she was a tenant with rights, that I'd invited her to live with me, that she'd provided care in exchange for room and board. My client has documentation showing Mr. Patterson's declining mental state, her lawyer said at the hearing. She was concerned about his welfare. Everything she did was with his knowledge and consent. Tom presented Sarah's findings: the fake identity, the prior victims, the financial discrepancies. The judge, a woman in her 50s, named Justice Catherine Osei, listened carefully to both sides. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "Mr. Patterson, do you understand what's happening here?" "Yes, Your Honor. This woman has been stealing from me and trying to make me look incompetent so I can't fight back." "And you're certain you didn't give her permission to access your accounts?" "I'm absolutely certain. She took advantage of my grief and loneliness." Justice Osei looked at Rachel's lawyer. "Counselor, your client has used multiple aliases and has a documented history of targeting vulnerable seniors. That's not caregiving. That's predatory behavior. I'm granting the restraining order. Miss Kowalski has 48 hours to remove herself and all her belongings from Mr. Patterson's property. If she fails to comply, she'll be removed by police." Rachel's face went white. Her lawyer started to argue, but Justice Osei cut him off. "We're done here." The next 2 days were tense. Rachel packed slowly, deliberately, making sure Michael and I knew how inconvenienced she was. Derek had already disappeared the moment the restraining order was mentioned, leaving Rachel to deal with the consequences alone. As she carried the last box to her car, she stopped at the door and looked at me. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she smiled, cold and brittle. "You won't win, George. They never do. I've got good lawyers, and you've got a grieving widower who made bad decisions. Good luck proving anything." After she left, Michael and I stood in the sudden quiet of the house. It felt violated, contaminated somehow. I noticed she'd taken several things that weren't hers. Helen's robe, some dishes, a lamp from the guest room. "Let her keep them," I said tiredly. "I just want her gone." But Sarah Chen wasn't done. Over the next 3 weeks, she built an airtight case. She pulled security footage from my bank, showing Rachel using my debit card. She recovered deleted files from my computer, including emails Rachel had sent herself from my account, authorizing transfers. She interviewed the teller at my bank, who confirmed that Rachel had come in multiple times, claiming to be helping me manage my money because I was getting forgetful. Most damning, she found Rachel's notes, a detailed log she'd kept on her phone of my supposed mental lapses, memory problems, and confusion. Except Sarah noticed something interesting. Many of the incidents Rachel described happened on dates when Rachel wasn't even at my house, according to the actual agency records from before they went under. She'd fabricated evidence. The police arrested Rachel in January. She was charged with fraud, theft, identity fraud, and elder abuse. Derek was picked up shortly after, facing similar charges plus his parole violation. The trial was in March, almost exactly a year after Helen had died. I sat in the courtroom, Michael beside me, and watched as the Crown prosecutor systematically destroyed Rachel's defense. They brought in the victims from London and Hamilton. They presented Sarah's evidence. They called witnesses from my bank, from my community center, from my book club, all testifying that I'd been sharp and competent until Rachel isolated me. The turning point came when they called Arthur Brennan's grandson, Marcus. He was a tall man in his 30s, and his voice shook as he testified. She did the same thing to my grandfather, made him doubt himself, took his money, kept his family away. The stress of it, the betrayal, it broke his heart. Literally. He had a massive coronary the day before we were supposed to confront her. I couldn't prove she killed him, but I know she did. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Rachel was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Derek got 4. As they let her out, she didn't look at me. I wondered if she felt anything at all, or if people like her were simply empty inside, feeding off others because they had nothing of their own. The financial recovery took months. I got back most of what she'd stolen, about $32,000, but not all. Her lawyer fees had eaten through some of it, and the rest had been spent in ways that couldn't be traced. I could afford the loss, but it wasn't really about the money. It was about trust, safety, dignity. Those were harder to recover. Michael stayed with me for 3 weeks after the trial. We cleaned the house together, top to bottom, scrubbing away any trace of Rachel. We repainted the guest room where she'd stayed. We went through my accounts, my documents, my entire life, and put security measures in place. New passwords, regular account checks. A proper home care agency, one Michael had thoroughly vetted, sending someone 3 mornings a week. "Dad," Michael said one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over Lake Ontario, "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner. You came when I needed you most. That's what matters. I should have pushed harder when I first got suspicious. I should have." "Michael, stop. This isn't your fault. It's mine for being so desperate for company that I ignored every red flag, and it's Rachel's for being a predator." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dad, have you thought about selling the house, moving to Vancouver to be closer to us?" I had thought about it, but this house was where Helen and I built our life, where we raised our son, where her garden still bloomed every spring. "No," I said. "I'm not letting her chase me out of my own home. Besides, I'm getting help now. Real help. And I'm not alone. I'm just living alone. There's a difference." Michael nodded, understanding. Before he flew back to Vancouver, he hugged me tight. "Call me every Sunday. And Dad, if anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to take advantage of you again, you tell me immediately. Promise?" "I promise." After he left, I started rebuilding my life. I went back to my book club. I reconnected with Tom, my neighbor. I volunteered at the community center, helping recent retirees navigate their new phase of life. And I talked about what happened, not in a therapeutic way, but in a warning way. I wanted other people to know how easy it was to fall into this trap, how loneliness could make you vulnerable in ways you never imagined. Tom Harper called me in June. "George, there's someone who wants to meet you." Another one of Rachel's potential victims. She saw the news coverage and reached out. Her name was Dorothy Chen, a widow in her late 60s from Scarborough. Rachel had just started working for her when she was arrested. Dorothy had hired her through what she thought was a legitimate agency, had started trusting her, had begun to depend on her company. "I feel like such a fool," Dorothy said when we met for coffee. "I almost gave her my banking information. She said it would make things easier." "You're not a fool," I said. "You're lonely and she's a professional predator. There's a difference." We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything, not to scare her, but to arm her with knowledge. By the time we finished, she was crying. "Thank you," she said, "for speaking up, for making sure she was caught. You saved me." That conversation changed something in me. I realized that what happened to me didn't have to be just a shameful secret. It could be a lesson. It could protect others. I started speaking at senior centers, at community groups, anywhere that would have me. I talked about the warning signs of elder abuse, financial exploitation, isolation tactics. I partnered with Sarah Chen, who'd become a friend, to develop educational materials. We called the program Trust But Verify, and it spread across Ontario, then into other provinces. 6 months after Rachel's sentencing, I received a letter from the parole board. She was appealing for early release, citing good behavior. I wrote a victim impact statement. "Rachel Kowalski targeted me at my most vulnerable," I wrote. "She weaponized my grief, my loneliness, and my basic human need for connection. She didn't just steal my money. She stole my sense of safety in my own home. She made me doubt my own mind. And she did it all with a smile, making me feel grateful for the abuse. This isn't someone who made a mistake. This is someone who has built a career out of destroying vulnerable people. Arthur Brennan is dead because of the stress she put him through. How many more victims will there be if she's released early?" Her appeal was denied. A year after the trial, I was invited to speak at a conference on elder abuse in Toronto. As I stood at the podium, looking out at social workers, lawyers, law enforcement officers, and caregivers, I thought about how far I'd come from that dark morning when I discovered what Rachel really was. "I'm here to tell you that getting old doesn't make you weak," I said, "but it can make you vulnerable in ways you don't expect. Loneliness is a powerful weapon in the wrong hands. The solution isn't to never trust anyone. It's to stay connected, to maintain your support systems, to verify before you trust. And most importantly, it's to speak up when something feels wrong, even if you're embarrassed, even if you feel foolish. Someone else's life might depend on it." The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterwards, a young woman approached me. She was a social worker, and she told me she'd just helped a client escape a similar situation. "Your story gave her the courage to report what was happening," she said. "Thank you. It's been 3 years now since Rachel came into my life. I still live in the same house. Helen's garden blooms every spring, and I tend it carefully. Michael and his family visit every summer, and I fly to Vancouver for Christmas. I have real friends, real support, real help when I need it. Sometimes I still feel lonely. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But I've learned that loneliness is better than the alternative," Rachel offered. "I'd rather be alone than be preyed upon. I'd rather face my grief honestly than have someone exploit it." Last month, I got a message through my lawyer. Rachel had written me a letter from prison. Tom advised me not to read it. "It's probably just manipulation," he said. "She's working on another appeal." But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The letter was short, 3 paragraphs. She didn't apologize. Instead, she tried to justify herself. She'd had a hard childhood. She'd been taken advantage of herself. She'd only been trying to survive. The last line read, "I hope you understand that I never meant to hurt you, George. I was just trying to make a life for myself." I read it twice, then put it in my shredder. She was still doing it, still trying to manipulate, to rewrite history, to make herself the victim. Some people never change. I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote my own letter, not to Rachel, but to anyone else who might be in the situation I'd been in. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let loneliness make you desperate. Don't let grief cloud your judgment. And remember, asking for help isn't weakness. Accepting abuse disguised as help, that's what actually makes you vulnerable. Stay connected to people who genuinely care about you. Verify before you trust. And never, ever let someone isolate you from the people who love you. Because that's when the predators strike, when you're alone and doubting yourself. You're stronger than you think. Even on your darkest days, you're stronger than they know. I keep that letter on my fridge now where I see it every morning. Some days I need the reminder more than others. But it's there, my promise to myself and to Helen's memory. I will not be a victim. Not anymore. The house is quiet tonight. But it's my quiet, my space, my peace. And that makes all the difference.